This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brian Garcia, President and CEO of the Connecticut Green Bank. It is January 13th, 2021, and this is the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee meeting. John Harity hopefully will be joining us shortly. He is not available at this moment, but we have decided to proceed in his absence. Lonnie Reed is present and Eric Brown is present. So why don't we move through the meeting agenda? There will be no votes on any agenda items until we have John join us, which would give us a quorum. So why don't we start off with any public comments from anybody on the line? Okay, hearing none, why don't we proceed to agenda item 4. We will skip the approval of the meeting minutes, and I do believe we had 2 sets, didn't we, Eric? Maybe June 10th?
Yes, there's the June 16th and the June 10th. So
great. So we will come back to those if John joins us later. So why don't we move to agenda item 4, which are the proposed revisions to the FY 2021 targets in budget. And let me turn it to Eric.
awesome. So typically for the committee, what we do at this point in the year is look at our progress to targets and try to hone where we think we're going to be for the year. This year was a little bit different because we initially gave a range on our programs, and so but we're still doing that. We've done that check-in to see how we're performing, and we are going to use this opportunity to update the board and propose some revisions to these targets. So on the incentive side, where I'll start, the whale of our activity is RSIP. And we're leaving the RSIP number of projects about the same. I know the board approved the RSIP-B, and that is the RSIP extension that's currently being used. We are using that to manage the volume and any overages. RSIP is still going on. We haven't closed that out yet. We have seen faster uptake in the program than we had initially believed. And we're seeking to leave the number of projects flat for what we proposed in the fall. So we expect to fall in that range of 3,177 to 4,700, probably to the higher end of that range. We are looking to update the capital deployed, and that will actually be higher than we had initially proposed at the lower end of that range. So we expect that to be between 100 and 153 million, as opposed to between 92 and 153 million. I'm sorry, between 96 and 143, as opposed to what we had previously stated, which was a little bit lower than that. So 92 to 133, I believe, was the previous RSIP target. And we're expecting to do between 27 and 40 megawatts. So that's reflective of the higher volumes that we're seeing. In terms of our solar for all, we've seen greater uptake, that we've increased the upper end of that target, and we expect that we'll hit the upper end of that target. Posigen has been bringing in projects that way ahead of schedule. In terms of our Equitable Modern Grid, which is our battery storage program that we had hoped would have launched by now this year, we're keeping that where it is, but I mean, we really are not expecting. I think we've cut the high end of those targets, and I don't think that we're going to see anything of significance actually come to fruition this year. In terms of Smart-E, we're seeing higher solar volumes than we'd initially expected, and also higher energy efficiency. And so we're increasing that target, the upper end of that, up to 740 projects from about 448, I believe. So we do expect to see continued growth there. So ultimately, for the incentive programs, we're expecting between 3,447 projects and 5,581 projects for somewhere between 100 and $153 million that will deliver us between 27.3 and 41.5 megawatts. Any questions?
Eric, this is Brian. Maybe just an addition on the equitable modern grid, just a quick update. We're going to go into a more extensive update at the board meeting, and Sergio will provide it with regards to docket number 17-1203, RE03, which is the battery storage docket. Last Tuesday, Pura came out with a straw proposal essentially supporting up to 580 megawatts of battery storage by 2030, and is requesting public comments from stakeholders by January 26th. So we're working with our team and our contractor, our consultant, Guidehouse, to put together a formal response to Pura's straw proposal. We're excited. Their straw proposal takes a lot of what we had submitted in our solarized storage proposal into consideration. So this is a part of a public comment period and will proceed through March, and the program may begin January 1st of 2022. So just a quick update. We would probably come back to the board in the fiscal year 2022 period with new targets that would be based on decisions in that docket. Okay, Eric.
All right, so moving on to the financing programs. We've tightened our target a little bit, as you'll see, but we're much. I'll walk through it one by one. I think we've gotten to a point of greater assurance about what's going to actually come to fruition this year. In terms of CPACE, we're leaving those targets flat. That what we seem to be on target to land in that range, probably right in the middle of it. And that's, I think we estimated what was in the pipeline pretty well when we put those targets together originally. In terms of the PPA, we are currently editing those, or we're currently shoring up those targets to be reflective of what's actually going to come from the state projects. So we have the number of projects is, I think we increased the higher end. We have increased the installed capacity and the capital deployed on those as well. And that is reflective of the PPAs that are in the process of being signed. So I think we have a strong degree of confidence around that. Small business energy advantage, that's remaining where it was, and that's just moving ahead with Eversource. There are no changes on any of the multifamily products in those targets. Our EV offsets, again, that's an emissions only target, and that is still on schedule to occur. And then in terms of the strategic investments and the items that Bert's working on, that remains the same. So the overall number of projects has come down. I'm sorry, I said that we increased the upper end of the projects. We actually increased the state number of projects. We cut some of the other projects in the solar PPA. So we've come down from about 1,300 projects down to 1,273 for the sector, or for the segment. And then we expect to deploy between $46 and $69 million worth of capital. And we expect that to deliver us between 11 and 20.7 megawatts. Any questions? In terms of revisions to targets that we've done in the past, these have been pretty straightforward. So, and pretty minor. So, if there are no questions, why don't we move on to our operating budget changes. So, in terms of revenues, we are proposing about $1.1 million of an increase in terms of revenue. And that's just reflective of the activity that we're aware of that's destroying our budget up to reality. That we've had higher than expected receipts in terms of the benefit assessment. We've had higher than expected Reggie clearing, Reggie auction proceeds, and higher than expected rec sales. So that's all coming in our favor. And in terms of expenses, I'll tell you how we want to spend that extra. Yep.
Just back on that, since you highlighted it as one of the main areas, I guess, for revenue increases, which is great. What were we budgeting, and what did we get to in terms of Reggie dollars, roughly?
We had expected 4.9 million for the year.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, 4.2, and we got 4.9.
So if you translate that into
the clearance,
the
auction clearance price, I'd have to go back and look. Jane, I don't know. Do you have that handy? If not, Eric, I can follow up with you after this.
Thanks.
I do have that information. Sorry, I was on mute. The clearing prices are the thing that are driving it. The actual allowances that have gone up at each of the auctions is pretty much what we have on budget. It's just the clearing prices seem to keep increasing, and I had actually forecasted them to decrease. I would suspect that this 665 that we've recognized here, if we see the same trend, it's probably going to increase maybe another couple, 300,000 for the last two auctions of the year as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
So in terms of expenses, not a whole load more that we're looking, it's totally new that we're looking to do here, but I'll walk through each of these in terms of the increases that we're seeking. So I'll start with the incentive programs. It's easier for me to walk through this the way that we did in the mailing. In program administration, we're looking for a handful of increases, 35,000 to match the volume of projects that we're seeing. We're looking to increase the inspections. Similarly with Smarty, we're looking to increase inspections by about $10,000. That we have more projects, we're going to need to inspect more of them. And then we're looking to reduce technical support by about $100,000, just due to our capacity to spend the original budget. That we're pretty confident that we're not going to spend $200,000 on development for the front end for our asset management system here this year. I'm sure we'll spend it next year, but just not right now. In terms of the incentive programs and EM&V, we're looking to increase spending by $100,000 to cover some of the consulting related to the regulatory work that we've been doing with Pura, and the smooth and orderly transition of the RSIP to the tariff. This has been done, and I forget the docket name, but we've been working with Guidehouse, and this is to cover some of the work that we have ongoing with them. And then in the final item in the incentive programs is around consulting and professional fees. We're proposing about $100,000 increase, which is totally cost recoverable. $20,000 of this is contingency related to our third-party engineer that we have to hire as part of the next bond issuance. And this is, we kind of learned our lesson last time, and we want a little bit of a buffer. We're hoping not to need it, but in case we do, it's the type of thing that we need to have quick turnaround, and we don't want to be searching for cash under the proverbial seat cushions if we need to get DNV out and re-inspecting systems so that we can make our timeline with that bond issuance. And then the rest of this is $87,000, which covers the cost of some former interns and consultant that we have who are working with us on clearing the backlog of closeouts on our projects. That we have a bunch of projects that just we need to make sure all the paperwork's in order so that we can mark it completed and move on. And that's stuff that we need to do anyway, and we don't want it to keep further backing up. So we're tackling that through former interns and a consultant. And the final piece of this is from Celia, who I think you all are aware will be transitioning away from us, and has kindly agreed to stay on as a consultant with us after she leaves in February. Any questions on that before I move to the financing programs? In terms of financing programs, there's going to be an increase of $1,167, which is a little misleading. It's $1,167 that flows through to this year's P&L, but is actually an increased expense of $14,000, which has to do with the build out and wiring at our new office. That when we did the original budget, we didn't budget for all the wiring to be done in how we needed it to. And so we're adding that expense, and being that that's a leasehold improvement, that gets amortized, and that amounts to an additional expense this year that hits this year's P&L of $1,167. We are moving a couple other items around in the budget that is on a level below this in terms of the build out. I think we're spending $30,000 less on furniture, but we're spending $30,000 more on the build out. It's negligible. I'm just giving you guys the heads up that we're proposing that reallocation as well. Any questions or concerns?
So Eric, this is Brian. At a high level, it appears that we have a positive variance on the revenue side with the receipts of more than budget for the Clean Energy Fund, the RGGI, and rec sales of about 1.15 million more than budgeted, originally budgeted. And then on the operating expense side, we are proposing, we have a negative variance proposal, or about $150,000 of expenditures for a bottom line net income increase of $1 million, given
Correct.
the higher revenues than expenses.
You nailed it, BG. So while we still didn't have a quorum to vote on a recommendation, we will present this at the board, and we can speak to it at that point.
Great. Any other, I had one other comment since we've got you, Eric Brown, on the line, just a more clarification on the battery storage incentive program. One of the things that we included in our proposal, Solarized Storage, was to also have our joint committee playing a governance function to support, specifically our working together collaboratively with the CLNM, the utilities, and the Green Bank. And it appears that the straw proposal that Pura put out there would invite both the Green Bank and the utilities to work together on implementing the program. So I think in our comments, we're going to continue to pursue the support of the joint committee to serve as a a governance structure that holds us together. You might remember, Matt, back in, I think, October, we talked a little bit about this proposal. So I'd like to keep that structure there to keep us all working in the same direction.
That's terrific. Glad to hear that Pura was, knowingly or unknowingly open to that kind of concept. That's terrific.
Okay, so why don't we, there are no other questions or comments on the budget proposed revisions and the target proposed revisions. We will prepare materials for the board meeting. We've got a mailing this Friday for the board meeting the following Friday, and we'll work through a similar presentation with the board, encouraging their feedback on this. We won't work through a resolution because we don't have a quorum. Any other comments, Eric Brown, Eric Schrago, or Lonnie?
I think we're good.
Yeah, so when we go to the board, we, I guess we can just say reviewed this, but I don't know. It all looks like good news to me, so I wish we could forward them a recommend. I don't know. Can we do anything by electronic vote? I mean, if John were amenable to it, even though he wasn't here for the review, to.
Yeah, we
No, we can't.
Yeah, we can't, but that's okay, Eric. I think what we can do is in the resolution, we will speak to the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee, having reviewed the recommendations by the staff, and we'll just kind of leave it there, just so the board knows in the resolution. And then, feel free during the board conversation to raise any areas of concern or areas of support.
Right. Okay, will do. Thanks.
Cool.
This is Lonnie. And wasn't Matt Rinelli interested in getting, sort of having more detailed look at all of these budget elements?
I don't, not to my recollection, but I have no problem walking these through with him, but.
Yeah, I think, during our last full board meeting, I think he said something about that, sort of wanting to ride herd a little bit more. He personally was saying it. I mean, he wasn't being critical, but he just sort of wanted to have, this is what I'm remembering. And so at least Eric, just ask him,
Absolutely.
if he wants to take a look.
And maybe Lonnie, so Eric, let's do that before now and next Friday. Maybe Lonnie, what you might be referring to is Kevin Walsh's suggestion after the board meeting when he sent an email, I believe, to you and I on the assets of the organization and whether or not we can present what the status is of our loans in terms of how they're performing, defaults, repayments, interest income coming back to the organization. And what we had planned to do is at next Friday board meeting is have Eric present some of our initial structure around asset management and how we're beginning to develop systems that track the performance of our various, loans, leases, projects, products, programs. That might be the detail you're after, but we will check with Matt Rinelli between now and then either way and work through with him.
Yeah, okay, good. That's maybe I didn't get it, but for some reason I thought Matt had, and I think it was in passing, but my ear caught it. And I think it's always good to keep him on board.
Cool. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, so just kind of moving along to the final agenda item, which really gets to the comprehensive plan. So we will propose with these revised targets that we edit the comprehensive plan, but we wanted to make some further recommendations to the comprehensive plan. So just, I love this photo. So our comprehensive plan for FY 2020 and beyond is called Green Bonds Us. Green, the environment bonds us, it unites us or brings us together. So we were very intentional about calling it Green Bonds Us from that unification perspective, as well as a green bonds perspective from what we're working on to access capital to help finance projects. So we were kind of being crafty with our language. So Green Bonds Us is implied in a lot of our strategic direction, including specifically our current vision statement, which is a world empowered by the renewable energy of community. A current goal we have to strengthen Connecticut's communities by making the benefits of the green economy inclusive and accessible to all individuals, families, and businesses, and I emphasize inclusive and all. The creation of Inclusive Prosperity Capital, the nonprofit, to maintain and build on our commitment to underserved communities that we nearly lost in terms of our mission from the sweeps. And then lastly, the citizen green bonds, what we called then mini green bonds, but what we now call our green liberty bonds. So this is actually a picture of Walton Jr. I don't remember his name, but he was adorable. Back in June of 2019, we celebrated with the Walton family at the Roosevelt House, which is their new home here, with the Hartford Area Habitat for Humanity. They were celebrating their 30th anniversary. We were at this event with Eversource, our partner on the project, Home Energy Technologies, and Posigen. And what they were doing was they were unveiling this zero energy ready home with the US Department of Energy. So between the significant energy efficiency home improvements done there and then the solar PV on the roof, their energy consumption is almost entirely offset. So they're in a really good spot as a household in terms of investing in energy and having no energy spend. As the events of the past week have shown us, our country is in a very difficult time. We're having to reckon with the structural racism that exists in our society. And, we, as the Connecticut Green Bank, need to be a part of the solution to realizing the promise of our democracy and ensuring that our system of capitalism works for everybody, especially the most vulnerable. We are widely recognized when it comes to solar with justice, ensuring that low to moderate income families and communities of color are demanding solar proportionately more than non-LMI families and white communities. We now need to be more explicit about our intention. So with that, the staff proposes the following changes to our comprehensive plan, really built around, the first part is built around equity objectives. I like to use this term JEDI, justice, environmental justice, ensuring that we are deploying clean energy to ensure that vulnerable communities are benefiting from the technologies. Obviously, equity, that they have access to and investment is being made in. Diversity, ensuring that the clean energy economy is benefiting everybody. I think we saw from our job study that we were behind, and we need to do more work in terms of ensuring more diversity in our workforce. And then obviously inclusion. We not only need people to be aware, but they need to be included in the economy, the green economy that we're trying to build. So as a framework, what we wanted to propose was that we consider changing our vision statement. I often talk about a world empowered by the renewable energy of community. That is our current vision statement. But sometimes, depending upon the audience, I'll follow it up with what it actually means to me, which is a planet protected by the love of humanity. This is what we are doing here. Our care and concern about confronting climate change and environmental protection is not going to happen unless we care about each other more. So it is really about that picture with Walton Jr., right? Loving humanity more, and we will look at things differently, and we will confront the climate crisis. So propose changing the vision statement to that. Definitionally, vulnerable communities, we would add throughout the document, which you see in red line. This is interesting because Public Act 2005 that passed in the special session in the fall, the Take Back Our Grid Act, actually defines vulnerable communities. We worked with Deep and others on that definition and focused our comments on the Community Reinvestment Act elements of that definition. CRA is a policy passed in the national government back in 1977 that encourages FDIC insured financial institutions, credit unions, local, state, federal regulated banks to ensure that they are investing in less than 80% area median income communities. So this fits very well with our using limited amounts of public to encourage more private. So that is now in a vulnerable communities definition at the state level. So we'd like to build that in to our comprehensive plan as we talk about LMI communities, communities of color. Goal number 2 in our comprehensive plan, we wanted to include and kind of pull out especially vulnerable communities in that second goal, which speaks to the benefits of the green economy. And then number 4 and number 5 is, okay, we recognize the importance of equity as an objective. You know, we focused a lot on driving investment, which leads to economic development benefits, environmental benefits, energy benefits. But now let's get to our E4 structure, which is an equity benefit. So we're actually proposing a target, which is by 2025, no less than 40% of the investment in benefits would come to vulnerable communities. We took a look initially at the data, and it's in the memo in terms of investment, and we're about 25 to 30% of our investment, public and private, over the last 3 to 5 years is in less than 80% area median income census tracts. So that leaves us room to improve 30 to 40% so that we can continue to mobilize more investment in populations that really need it the most. So those are kind of the JEDI, if you will, recommendations for inclusions into the comprehensive plan. And then there are other things that are just kind of simple cleanups on the incentive program side. Obviously, adjusting the progress to targets that Eric just mentioned. Same thing with the financing programs. Any adjustments we'd include there. A narrative around the COVID-19 impacts on the sustained orderly development that led to our conversation and board approval of the RCIP extension. So we included some language there. And then a brief update on solarized storage, where the Green Bank was in terms of submitting its proposed design into the PURA docket and where that stands, including some language around green liberty bonds. They were called mini green bonds before. Now we've given them a name. And then various other cleanups, patronicity in there for sustainable Connecticut, replacement of IOBI, including E4 evaluation framework, where equity becomes our 4th metric that we're building out, and updating the report linkages from our comp plan for the 2020 comprehensive annual financial report and the annual report. So there would be links to those documents. So the other proposed revisions are really kind of cleanups and updates. The JEDI proposals are to bring us up to committing and being very intentional with enabling more investment in vulnerable communities as we build work hard to build Connecticut's green economy. So I think that was it. There's a resolution, but happy to just hang out here for a little bit and get your thoughts and guidance.
This is Lonnie. I'm sort of, I was listening and I'm reading. and I'm just thinking to pull into it racism as a public health crisis. I mean, that's what we're living right now. And when you think about, you know, where it's coming from, it's energy pollution and transportation pollution kind of thing. It feels like that opens up, you know, a whole bunch of folks who kind of might embrace our goals, who kind of don't really get energy on its own, you know, kind of just develop that potential revenue stream.
Great. So on that, Lonnie, maybe so what I'm hearing is maybe I'll go back to the memo in a red line and include some narrative around how COVID has disproportionately impacted Black and Hispanic communities as a result of, you know, yes, pre-existing conditions, but also air pollution that is exacerbating, you know, from energy and transportation that's exacerbating the problem. Is that what I hear?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I mean, it's, you know, it's clearly, I mean, when you think about the children, the low income and poor children and children of color who get asthma at very early ages and how that impacts their whole, you know, I mean, there are all these elements running through how folks are growing up and living that impacts all of us, you know. And it just feels that that folks can be mobilized around those issues as well and bring them into our energy arena. Plus federal money. I mean, it's so clear that that was part of the Biden campaign that we all worked on. Some of us worked to help make sure that they shaped really productive energy policy and the idea that we're really going to deal with those communities. And we want federal funding to kind of help us some of our goals. I think it'd be good to really state it, to lay it out.
Great. Yeah, the as we worked on those activities and you know, not knowing where Congress is heading in the context of the Biden-Harris policy priorities, one could presume that you know, the modernization and decarbonization of the infrastructure of America's infrastructure is going to be priority, and with that is jobs and environmental justice 40. I mean, those were clear from the campaign, and I can tell you from the transition team's perspective, those were frontline. Every conversation was focused on that, jobs and vulnerable communities, or environmental justice in this context. Great. Okay, anything else? You know, feel free to send me a note or any ideas. I'm happy to change the presentation up a bit. If this worked, great. Just send me a note. I'll do it again. But you know, really being intentional about ensuring vulnerable communities are a priority, and we're measuring progress to delivering investment in benefits over time will be the foundation.
Brian, it might be helpful if between now and then you could circulate, or maybe it's in the materials you sent, I don't know, I'm just looking at the overheads, but that definition that you referenced for vulnerable communities, just so we all know what we're talking about when we use that term.
Cool. Yeah, it's in the memo, Eric. And yeah, you know what? Why don't I pull? Why don't I just have a slide on vulnerable communities? Because I think we'll probably, you know, the board may want to just hang out there for a while. You know, Deep was a big advocate of that. We're a big supporter, obviously, and implementer of that. But maybe we can call that out in a slide specifically, because I really think it frames a lot of our metrics. You know, literally we used it to start our conversation again with the Department of Banking Commissioner around Community Reinvestment Act to work with them on some metrics. So it's really foundational. So why don't I do that? I'll have a slide on it.
And do you think that term encapsulates or includes the concerns, the racial concerns that have been expressed? In other words, I don't know. I don't know if, you know, let's say folks that live in Bridgeport within a half a mile of I-95, you know, I don't know if, you know, white kids are any more or less likely to get asthma than kids of color or not. So, you know, vulnerable communities is focused on sort of income, which it sounds like, you know, 80%, the 80% number.
Yeah. So
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so I'm taking a look at the definition quickly on my little board effect. So LMI communities, environmental justice community, pursuant to that section of the statute. You know, maybe we could even pull up that and provide the board that background on that environmental justice bill, which I don't think is too long. You know, communities eligible for CRA pursuant to the CRA Act as amended from time to time. So that was our inclusion to bring in private investment. Populations with increased risk and limited means to adapt to the effects of climate change, or as further defined by DEEP in consultation with community representatives. So I don't see things in there specifically around race. I feel like I've seen recently, maybe it was in the IRP. I don't know, Juliana, if you can speak to this. I feel like I've seen it recently in terms of having the conservation and load management plan look at equity metrics beyond income. So that may, you know, be other things. I don't know what those other things are. To me, beyond income, to me is going to be race. But I will have a slide on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think that's it. So if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right. All right, Eric, Lonnie, thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you. Thanks, everybody.
All the way.